All right, it is Monday, August 11th. I am fresh, dripping, sunburn coming off of the Patriots practice field before they go to Minnesota. I will be there. But in the meantime, we're going to do something we do not do very often here in the Pats Interference podcast, brought to you by the hardy, heroic, and hunky-dory CLNS Media Network. We're going to go backwards, backwards by more than a couple of days. We like to look forward here. We like to dive into the details, but usually, boom, boom, boom. Here's what happened. Patriots had a preseason game Friday night. We all watched it. Saturday, I sat with the film. Then had my in-laws over. Sunday went back to practice, and then Monday was practice again. So, as much as I wanted to chat with Dan Pizzuta, an NFL writer you should be following, who will be making you smarter wherever you follow, read, and listen to him, today was the only day to do it. So I said, look, let's put a spin on this. What did we miss? What did everyone who has watched this game, the sickos, amongst us, let's be clear, we're a family, the sickos, are we not?
I think we are. The fact that we're breaking down film of preseason games, I know, as a beat writer, you need to do that maybe more than some national guys need to. But and anytime you're really diving into what a preseason game means, I think there's sicko behavior, which is fine. It's encouraged.
Yeah, you took that very kindly that I sprung the term sicko on you and inducted you into this fictitious family. But the point being,
I mean, it fits.
Yes, it fits. And I say that because I know some folks have rewatched the game, and that might be just to enjoy it because 48 points was a franchise record in the preseason, which whatever that's worth. But it was fun to watch. Others are parsing through the film. And I want to say this before I violate my own rule. There is a risk of getting lost in the details of preseason football where one Blake Bortles once shined and the 0-16 Lions first went undefeated. So we don't want to lose the forest for the trees. But for now, this is all we have. This is what we're going to talk about. And before we get into the little nitty gritty and get lost in the forest of the details, the biggest thing was Drake May, who ran for more yards than he threw. He finished 3 of 6, the strip sack fumble, the YOLO ball, boom, right there in case you forgot, as we all did over the offseason, glazing rightfully, I think, a great young quarterback. He then marches down the field afterward and then scrambles in for the touchdown. So all of that considered, his 2 series, what stood out to you about Drake May?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was still some kind of offensive execution around him that we kind of is probably more of the big picture of what had to do with Drake May's passing line looking like it did. Because the first play is a bad screen that just kind of was dead on arrival. You look at the sack, it's just kind of a struggle of passing off a stunt. So it's, kind of some of the similar things that you're kind of wanting to, but looking at the 2 scrambles, I think those are the things that I'm kind of looking for Drake May a little more. I know there's been talk about whether there's going to be more, designed runs there. But the fact that he was kind of saw those openings in the field and was able to take off and make them useful. Those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for, whether, he even though he threw for 2.4 yards per attempt, probably not what you're looking for, but again, not really concerning when you kind of look at, what his overall process was.
Yeah. Context. That was, it was leaded by film review, which people can read here at thebostonherald.com, that you're going to get a lot of it here in the next 30 minutes or whatever, because part of the context is, hey, the Commanders just said we're out. we're sitting. Jane Daniels and anyone else who we really care about, Jonathan Jones, former Patriot, got to sit. And so he's going up against backups. The other context, though, is what you just alluded to, is that familiar problems are cropping up again, and there's plenty of time to smooth them out, but nonetheless might be things that Drake May must overcome in addition to learning a new offense. As far as the new offense went, and again, this is base stuff, simple, but what was your impression of the first glimpse? It might have even been a half a glimpse of Drake May in a Josh McDaniels system.
Yeah, I think it was good. I think he was kind of, looking for some things. I think there was a little more over the middle that they were trying to. Kind of looked like those were where some of his progressions were to start. I think on the sack, I think he was trying to hit over the middle, and I think on at least one of the scrambles, it was kind of looking there. And again, you wasn't going with the full complement of, wide receivers too. So not totally sure how much that does, but I still think this is going to. It's going to be fun because I think the run game is something that I think we'll probably get to a little bit. It'll be a takeaway. I think there's going to be more emphasis there. I think that'll be a little more efficient than it was. I think that is eventually going to help them out. I think we'll eventually see, a more expanded play action game off of that, which we really didn't see in this game. So I think there is a lot to like. Again, you can only, take away so much, but some of the processing things, I think still optimistic about what this passing offense could look like.
I am too. And this even counts if the Patriots go into Minnesota and Brian Flores chops them up like he does a lot of other teams that come in. As Garrett Bradbury told us the other day, like, yeah, I've had joint practices when he was in Minnesota. Teams come in and it's a, quote, disaster because of Brian Flores and his blitz happy scheme that, is a little bit different from everybody else. But I want to stay with the sack for 1 second because, I asked Drake about this immediately after the game. I said, was that play about instinct, or was there kind of a deliberate thought process there, before obviously he did something he didn't want to do? And he just said instinct, which you could go, okay, like guy gets hit for the first time in 8-9 months, trying to get away, stretching the limits of what he knows he can do and refiguring that out again. Or the flip side would be, here's the YOLO ball showing up again that people who were detractors when he was a prospect in North Carolina, again, behind a bad offensive line and with iffy weapons, felt like he had to do it all. And sometimes that was great. And other times it looked like it did at the end of that first drive. I'm not going to make a mountain out of a molehill, but as that little play is an encapsulation of a larger conversation around Drake May, where do you fall, even if you want to put that play to the side?
Yeah, it's one of the things where I think some of these quarterbacks, like a Drake May, you kind of have to have a little bit of, I'm going to do something maybe kind of stupid. And I think when things are going well, like Josh Allen still has that in him. A little bit. I think, you want to have it reined in a little bit, but I still think you want that mentality there to some point. I think for that specific play, probably not the greatest idea because I really don't know where he was trying to go with it or what the best case scenario in getting that ball out was going to be. But I'm not overly concerned to where it's going to be a problem. I do think he does kind of have to have the playmaker mentality a little bit. So he's going to be one of those guys that tries things, which I think is still more often going to be a positive than it is a negative. I think you just have to kind of learn when it's really going bad and there's no way a play is going to be made, kind of like that sack was. You probably should be holding that a little bit, but I think overall kind of having the mentality, I'm not too worried about too many, backbreaking crazy mistakes like that. I'm not worried about Drake May, turning into, Will Levis at any point.
God, can you imagine Mike Vrabel escapes Tennessee and all of the talent pool that dried up there, and he just gets Will Levis again, like haunting him back from 2 years ago? I'm with you. Look, I'm on the record, was before they drafted him, a firm Drake May believer, like converted. I went to one meeting and it was over. And the interesting part of this to me, though, is that tension, which I say is a push-pull dynamic, not a they're mad at each other, between May and McDaniels, who's mostly coached quarterbacks who are not just pocket-bound, but guys who were naturally, I don't say risk-averse, but pretty close. Like, aside from when Mac Jones lost his mind in those last couple of seasons, it was him, it was Brady, Derek Carr in Vegas. There wasn't a whole lot of worrying about, I need to tame this part of their game, even as you put, like there's a trade-off. Like those plays that Josh Allen makes 6 inches from the sideline, it's going to be backbreaking one way or another. Either it's the defense that had this play covered for 6 seconds and then at 6.2 just got absolutely screwed, or it's a pick going back the other way. And for the team that wants to reach the ceiling and exceed expectations, you have to live with some of that. Like, I don't mind the turnover so long as it's him testing the limits of his ability and finding out where those are. And for the record, for folks who are on the opposite side going, I can't deal with the turnovers anymore, he's had 3 in training camp on 147 dropbacks. So you're looking basically at about 2% there. That to me would be fine. Granted, it's training camp, but I asked McDaniels about this because I'm writing about it over the weekend. I don't know if that's anything that's occurred to you or even matters, like just where he's come from and now the quarterback that he's dealing with.
Yeah, I think it is, like you said, it is super interesting that he hasn't really, I don't think you can get much different in mentality than like Derek Carr and Drake May.
Yeah.
But like how the trade-off comes is going to be interesting because it comes back to like, that really reminds me of like the Jordan Love conversation, like that's been happening nationally, where he's, this gunslinger who's, doing all these crazy things, which he has had like a couple of turnovers, but he's also, so good at avoiding sacks that his actual volume of negative plays is so low. And he was still one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. And I think there is an area where Drake May could potentially be that, even if the ball goes into harm's way occasionally, if he does some other things in his game that limits the overall negative plays and still has some of those positive, big explosive plays, then that's still something you could build in efficient passing offense around. And Drake May is definitely talented enough to be something like that. He has that skill set. So, even if some of those things are there, I do think there is certainly a way to build an offense around that.
It's a great point. And I think in the larger discourse, wherever that takes place nowadays, people are more aware of sack avoidance being a really, really important skill. And in New England, we absorbed that through Tom Brady's quick trigger. And you could hear, Joey Bosa in the 2018 divisional round game be like, God damn, I can't get to him. Impressive. He says this in this like deep meathead voice. Yeah. But there are other ways to do it, obviously, running around to a certain extent. And the point being, when you take a sack, the odds are almost astronomical that drive is going to end in a couple of plays thereafter. So it's almost virtually as good as a turnover, even if we understand the two things are very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different ways to, be avoidant of sacks. Like you said, there's going to be the guys who are just getting the ball out quickly. Like Miami runs an offense right now that is basically based on that. You cannot sack us because you will not get to our quarterback before the ball is out. And that's their whole thing. With Drake May, there's going to be a little more of the scrambling, but I think having, some of that in the McDaniels offense, some of that quick stuff over the middle, which I don't think was quite there, as comfortably in the offense last year. I think that will be some stuff added in. So I do think there's certainly going to be a collaborative effort to figure out how to get that to make sure there are not those high levels of negative plays in this offense.
Yeah, the middle of the field is going to be, it's a critical battleground for virtually every offense, but especially as we return to the McDaniel system, which has got some spin on it and flavors, and we could talk about that later. But one last note on May. Mike Vrabel talked about him on Sunday, took some questions about what he thought. And this is a guy, as we know, who's not going to gloss over much or dress it up. He's going to call it as he sees it. And right after the game, he said, that's a bad decision. Like I had a headline ready that was Mike Vrabel calls out Drake May. It wasn't really fair because he was prompted by a question. So that's not the headline that we ran. But the point was, he was like, yes, bad. Cannot have that. Aside from that, he was asked about, did he miss some receivers deep? And maybe Matt Collins was open in the end zone on that scramble. And he was like, look, like it's hard to throw back across your body deep when you're already on the move and getting a ground on that first scramble. And then like, okay, Matt Collins was open for a split second. So if you really want to nitpick, I don't know that Mike Vrabel's with you on that. I don't know that I am either. So it really was just the turnover, which in texting with a couple of people within the team after the game was something they all brought up because they know their future. The franchise is literally in Drake May's hands. So that's about it on him, unless we miss something.
No, I don't think so. And again, I think even if there was, an opening on a scramble, those scrambles are going to be positive plays more often than not. So if, as someone of his ability is able to make a scramble, I think you look at a guy like Justin Herbert, who kind of does have that same, I think, athletic ability, just doesn't use it because he's just so robotic in the pocket. He's going to, this is my progression. I am going to do this. And I think that does kind of lower his ceiling a little bit sometimes. But if you have a guy like Drake May willing to take off and run, more often than not, those scrambles are going to be positive decisions.
Sounds like Justin GPT.
Yeah, kind of. It's kind of how he plays quarterback. Yeah,
it's even like just the throwing motion. Like there's not as much kind of creativity in there as much as like I think he is the beloved quarterback, and rightfully so. Like top 10, slot him wherever you want of like football Twitter. And then you have a playoff game like that, which is all of the ammo that any armchair quarterback or talking head needs. I still think really highly of Justin Herbert, but that contrast I think is probably overlooked when we were all doing the Drake May is the love child between Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. Like, no, he looks a little bit more like dad with Josh Allen, the creativity in the arm angles and Justin. All right, let's stick with the offense. How did you experience Will Campbell's first snap in an NFL preseason game and then the first snap of the second drive that they ran?
Yeah, it's probably what you're gonna want to look for. And again, there were probably some pass protection issues that could be solved throughout the game. Again, that sack did stress from not passing off, or he's so engaged in his defender that they weren't able to pass off that stunt. But when you're looking at what he's doing, not just the physicality, but how far downfield he was getting into both of those runs and just like making sure and picking corners. Like if you are a defensive back, you are going to think twice about trying to charge hard if Campbell is out there in space, and for that to be something that's already established within like 2 plays in 2 drives. I think that's a very fun thing to be looking out for.
I say this with all of the respect, and not just because I don't want to end up as a poor corner. Noah Igbenagbedi, I
Yeah.
was not going to say last name, and then we botched it. Will Campbell's over-under for personal fouls this year is probably 2.5, and that might be a little low. And I say this as someone who profiled Will and had his dad tell me, the quote was in the story, football Will is not Thursday Will. Like, you can see that dude is trying to not just put people on the ground. He wants to put people through the ground. And for plays like crack toss, where he's going to be leading, as we saw at the first start of the first 2 drives, that's great. At some point, there will be a lot more pushing back in his direction, but he can figure it out. And you're right. The sack that everyone else has kind of studied, Marshall Newhouse had a nice breakdown of this on Blue Sky. And, was to say, look, they both kind of screwed up. And I think there's a little bit of tunnel vision, as you'll have with the rookie offensive lineman. Their spacing was also a little bit different. And the recognition was a little bit too slow, which too slow is a quarter of a second, a half second. But at this level, that's what it needs to be if they want to start and thrive there. Okay, as far as running the ball goes, things that I had, there was a big pivot, first half, a lot of man block runs. We talked about the crack toss, and some duo was later in the second quarter. Then you had second half was really more zone blocking. And this is not, revolutionary that Josh McDaniels was running both, but it was interesting to me because, Dan, we've seen a lot of outside zone early in camp, based off day 1, 2, 3, 4 installs. And that helped the boot stuff that they've now introduced to the offense, old school Shanahan system, as a complement. What do you think is a better fit for this offensive line? And then what else did we miss aside from the kind of big picture scheme talk with that group?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's kind of, I feel like some of these preseason games, you do want to see what you get away with, and I think there was a lot of fun man blocking stuff when they did it. I think one of the first big run that they had, it was Campbell and Jared Wilson with a nice like double team blocks, getting some space there. So I think you do want to see what you can there. I do think we are shifting toward a little more, man and gap across the league, since there's so many of these defenses now that are, ready for it, for the outside zone. So that's always going to be nice to have. You're going to want that. That is much easier to, I think, mesh with some of the play action concepts that you're using. So you do want that in your bag, but I think having that, the man gap stuff in the bag and the ability to run that, I think if you can major in that a little more and have efficiency there, I think that does give you a little bit of a leg up of some of these defenses. So if they can handle it, which I think they were able to, I think the run game looked fairly good early on with the starting offensive line that they had. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to see as much of what they can get away with that.
Yeah. What else did you like or not like with the offensive line? I mean, we know they're young and they pulled some of the starters late, and there's, a real hodgepodge behind them, but you even have guys kind of playing new positions like we've seen in camp because, Cole Strange might not make the team. So he's playing right guard. Like, there's a lot of like little stuff, but, as someone who's dealing with little stuff constantly, anything stand out to you from more of a national perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of like, Campbell obviously is going to be, the big thing, which I think was definitely helpful there. When you kind of look at, I was fairly impressed by what Marcus Bryant was doing at tackle. It was up and down again for what he was thrown into, being the starting tackle in that game. I think like if you have some depth there of what he can do. So I think just showing that they might have at least a deeper offensive line than they had in the past, even if it might not be, the best offensive line in the league. I think having that quality and, potentially not a weak link is certainly going to be nice there, especially if you do have, maybe go 1 or 2 deep in that rotation there where you're not petrified of offensive line injuries either. And I think that's a big piece.
To your point, Marcus Bryant played 43 snaps, the 7th rounder out of Missouri. And he's played left tackle. He's played right tackle, both in camp. And today, 2 practices after this exhibition, he was ahead of Demontre Jacobs, who last year was not only a starter, but for most of camp was their swing tackle. And we don't have to spend much more time on the number 3, number 4 offensive tackle battle. But for things you might have missed, that guy playing a lot and playing well at both spots, and someone who, at least in my opinion, is probably better suited for some man block runs. And I think Campbell could do both. I think Jared Wilson could do both. Mike Onwenu was better suited for some man block concepts. And the guy in the middle, we haven't talked yet, who gets a lot of flack, and deservedly so, for some of his pass blocking in practice. Garrett Bradbury kicks some major ass up front, and the timing on the release of those double teams early to get to the second level, I thought was great. And that's what they want to do. They want to play downhill because that's where their talent is, mostly in the backfield for their skill group. But also, this is a much better run blocking offensive line, A, than last year, but still B, this year than you would expect given their pass protection talent.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be, a big basis of kind of how they're building this offense. And, some of the even when you kind of look at some of the formations they were using, a lot of, extra guys in the backfield. There was a snap of like actual pony personnel with Stevenson and Henderson in the backfield. And I think like if they can do some of that stuff where there's either an extra guy in the back to block for some passing things if they need some help on that offensive line, I think a lot of the just structure of that offense is going to be built around what they are able to do on that offensive line. I do think that's going to help, give some different looks in the run game. And also I think they'll have some extra help there in the passing game if they need it.
Let's stay with the pony personnel, because this is something that, I think people in my chair like to throw out because you get like one football term and you sound like, the whole playbook. And this is something I've said for years. Other people talk about it. It's not a big deal. It just makes me laugh when, we face things outside of football would sound a little ridiculous. And in this vacuum that we live in, sounds smart. One snap of that, I watched them run a lot of pony personnel in 2018, my first year in the beat, when it was a Rex Burkhead, James White backfield. And the advantage there was you would presume that this grouping would be matched with kind of base defense, right? You're either getting 3 or 4 linebackers, and one of them you'll be able to take advantage of. I think more teams now are matching with big nickel, and that advantage is a little bit lost, unless, as you said, one of your running backs is willing and able to serve as kind of a lead blocker. Because if it trots out in your run pass ratio, something like, 4-to-1 pass, defenses are like, fine, we don't need to match that kind of bulk. So what else needs to be a part of that package for it to be effective? Because it sounds cool in theory, right? Stevenson and Trayvon Henderson in the field at the same time with 1 tight end, 2 receivers. You don't know what's coming. But if the defenses don't really care what one outcome is, they can kind of play to the other, right?
Yeah, so I wrote about this a couple years ago about how pony personnel is kind of like the thing we hear about every training camp. We're getting both backs on the field. Someone's moving out in the slot. And then one just doesn't work in practice. And not in practice of like on the practice field, just like in practice of it actually being in a game. And then it just kind of goes away. And a lot of the things is because one, it does hurt the passing offense usually because you are more often than not taking off a receiver on the field and putting in a running back who is usually most likely not as good of a pass catcher as the wide receiver you're taking off the field. And because you have now 2 running backs on the field, your passes are usually shorter. So there's no like explosive pass element there. So in order for pony personnel to work, you do need a little bit of the versatility in some of these guys that are able to either line up in the slot. I'm not totally sure if the Patriots are there yet, but you are going to need some type of explosive pass element. I think that might be where they're able to go because Trayvon Henderson, I think is just going to be an explosive threat no matter how he gets the ball. So that could potentially be a thing. I don't think it's going to be, some huge piece of their offense. But I do think for them, it might be an interesting wrinkle that they're able to use a little more than we would normally see and be able to have it be an efficient part of their offense without it being, so condensed, which is usually kind of what happens when teams are trying to throw 2 running backs on the field at the same time.
Yeah. And let's be clear too, because, I can make fun of it and then you can back it up, which is why we have you on in addition to the insights and actually writing about this years ago. Like you could go to some origins of some real West Coast stuff and all the 2-back stuff that Bill Walsh was running at a higher pass rate than the rest of the league, which then was revolutionary. And very often, football becomes cyclical. So again, whether they major in it or not, I just want to make sure we're not discussing this. And this is more me checking myself, not you, as something that is, newly discovered that Josh McDaniels went around to colleges all last year and came back with this idea of 2 running backs in the field who can catch and run. But while we're on the running backs, and then we'll go to the receivers and pivot to the defense, talk to me more about Trayvon Henderson. I see him every single day. I've called him maybe the best offensive player in camp. He only played 7 snaps, 6 of them were on pass plays. In addition, let's include the kickoff. That was an offensive play. Okay, 7 more points for him. What else do you like? What else do you see?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you just kind of saw what he was able to do. I think they are going to be looking to get him the ball in the passing game, which I think is going to be helpful. I think that'll be a nice outlet for him. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a little more of like not an actual route tree, but more of a route tree than we see for a typical running back. I don't just think it's going to be, flats and screens.
Yeah.
So I do think if he's able to do that, that's going to be a piece of an offense that not a lot of teams are able to use. And like we saw, anytime he gets the ball in his hands, like he can make a guy miss. And if you're making the first guy miss, the chances of an explosive play happening just kind of to go up, and we just kind of saw his speed and elusiveness, and that's something that's going to be really fun, especially if you start getting some of those better blocking up in the offensive line. You get a clear hole, he only has to make one guy miss. I think that is something that it really brings a potential big play element that they just didn't really have in that run game previously.
Yeah. One note, I said we're going to go to the receivers. I just wanted to make mention because I threw his name out there and I have notes about him, but not a great game for Cole Strange. And I know he's playing a little bit out of position at right guard. And this is just to say, like, people who have been characters in your life as a Patriots fan that you can normally count on, as we've seen, were ushered out the door in the offseason. Jonathan Jones, Dietrich Wise, David Andrews. That doesn't guarantee them anything right now. And part of it's because Jared Wilson's been really good. Good news. Ideally, the Patriots, though, would have a swing guy, and it just might not be Cole Strange, not because of what I've been telling you in practice, which is also just reality, but you could see it here in the game. All right, let's go to the receivers. I'm going to start in the obvious place. And a hat tip to my guy, longtime listener, Gary Langley, who tweeted these at me basically right after I'd seen them. The obvious place, of course, Dan, is John Giles, who is this very tall, slow receiver who is going to get all the praise for all the coaches who love to start in the non-obvious place with a wide receiver whose job is to get open and catch the ball, and it's run blocking. We really loved his run blocking. And for a run-heavy offense, like, that counts, okay? Not completely dismissing it. To me, I just rather have the guy who's not the world's best run blocker, but the world's best pass catcher. Anyway, I liked his effort. He helped spring Efton Chisholm on a big screen. He is a guy that Mike Vrabel even shouted out yesterday in his press conference and was celebrating with at rookie minicamp when John Giles had a touchdown. He wears 83. In case this is all going right by you. But if you want to pivot from John Giles, we've already spent about a minute on him. So receivers, talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was receivers are interesting just because, that was the one piece where we didn't really see what this Patriots offense is actually going to look like during the regular season. I think that was the most, unlike it. But, I think we can look at like Kyle Williams, who, again, I don't think had a reception, but I think looked really good. If you kind of are looking a little closer on what he did, I think he was coming the play he had like in the red zone where he was targeted. It was a pass broken up, but wins like right off the snap. The defensive pass interference that he drew, I think was just a nice release. I think he looks smooth. So it's something where that's something you want to look a little closer than the 0 catches on the box score. So I think that is going to be something that's fun. And again, you eventually are going to want to see, what this offense looks like with, the receivers who you are expecting to be out there. So, I think he was my big takeaway because I think that's kind of the guy you would like to see step up if this is going to be a very strong and deep receiving core. But I was impressed with him. Yeah. Even though, it comes out with a goose egg in the box score.
Yeah. Kyle Williams got a lot of love from folks of us on the beat who, watch every single snap and chart a lot of it. And I made note of that. While also noting he's had an up and down summer. And so I said he needs more consistency. Some people took umbrage to this, that a 3rd-round rookie, God forbid, was up and down. And this happened to be an up Friday night. He's since had 0 catches in 2 practices and only 1 target from Drake May. And the throw was off target. That part's not his fault. But, the things that I liked about Kyle Williams as a prospect, okay, are still evident. You hit on one of them. It's the release package. And when I considered that, it was very often, in the context of beating press coverage for a quick reception. It was in the context of getting off the line and then winning deep. Personally, I had never considered him much as like a red zone threat because of his size and because you've got other ones, Hunter Henry, Matt Collins, if you want to go out there. Kayshon Boutte's been great in contested catch situations. But the way that he uncovered like that has me rethinking that a little bit. And I like it for him. I still wish, and I think the Patriots wish, he started to build at this point in the summer, right? Like you get a week or two, get your feet wet, and you've had good moments and you flash, but this consistency starts to develop. That doesn't happen for him yet. And it might this week in Minnesota. That'd be great. But there's another guy who's doing it, and it's Efton Chisholm. And of course, the little white slot guy is thriving in New England in the Josh McDaniels system. But, aside from the jokes, what did you see from him?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that was kind of one of those things too. I'm guys like him are fun, like usually during the preseason, but they're kind of the guys that I don't quite think always translates to, getting time on the field afterwards. So it does feel like he's kind of one of those, which I think when you are able to have a deeper receiving core, that's going to be fine. But, it's always nice to have one of those. And when you are going to be that targeted, like as often as he was in that game, you're obviously doing something right. So I think we do see how he is able to get open. And that's one of those things that the Patriots haven't always had the past couple of years at receivers. So it's nice, but I'm not sure if it's, a skill set that's going to continue to play a larger part as we kind of get into it. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about some of these preseason things where, it was a good performance. He played well, but whether that kind of translates into what they want to do further down the line, I'm just not totally sure.
Well, and it doesn't help that Pop Douglas is literally stacked right on top of him as, their starting slot receiver. And this might be an offense, as we already hit on, might play some two back. Could align with their two tight ends if and when Hunter Henry reappears at practice. And that will prohibit them from playing with three receivers and putting one directly in the slot. And so, obviously they can play tighter, condensed formations, and that will give Pop, two to go. But the point is, for Efton Chisholm, I agree that the ceiling there, at least this season, is it's hazy. It's hard to see through. And for him, this story, even though I just put him on my first 53-man roster of the year, feels like an Austin Collie kind of ceiling, or Austin Carr is actually the name that I want to put, because he was a guy in New England. And my guy, Mark Daniels, brought this up, almost a decade ago, is, shocking people at training camp. And that was a very different team and a very different era. But the point is, like you're saying, sometimes the preseason darlings don't exactly translate. I'm not guaranteeing anything about Efton Chisholm and the Efton Chisholm experience, but the context for him is working against him, even if the offense feels right, and the production so far has been good.
Yeah, I think we see that, and I think it's the easiest thing to fall in love with, like the wide receiver 6. I think like that's the easiest like preseason guy like training camp guy to fall in love with. Just for anyone watching, I feel like if you just kind of take a poll of who like gets the most attention, it's usually like some of those guys. And again, if he makes the roster, he's probably going to be able to. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a special teams type of thing. Like New England is always just kind of building on those guys, and maybe eventually can come in and can certainly play a role, which is fun. And again, when you have a guy who can get open like that in the slot, always a positive. Just probably not going to be the biggest part of New England's offense.
So Efton Chisholm played the most snaps among all receivers. He had 32. Right behind him was Javon Baker with 26. And then you get to Kyle Williams at 25. And then it goes further down the list, and there's not as much. You can tell those are the guys they want to learn about. Those are the guys they want to, give some run and give a shot to. Probably, Williams is going to make the team, obviously. But Baker, who also might win in a special teams kind of role, because now he's their starting gunner, is a developmental number 6 guy. If the job doesn't go to Kendrick Bourne, if and when he returns, and again, I don't think that's going to be certainly not within this week, maybe not even the start of next week. But anything on Baker? My stat that I oversay is he had same number of catches as the left tackle did last year. But he seems a little recommitted when I see him up close. Just anything on tape or anything, even as a prospect, that you're still holding on to.
Yeah, he's a guy I did like as a prospect. Like some of the numbers I pull on the like what these guys are doing in the context of their offense. He came out pretty well. I thought he would be a little more of a consistent deep threat that he was able to be, but it just kind of seems like some of the refinement isn't there quite as much. So it's tough. And again, when you have like a Mac Hollins now, who's probably going to be like just that, to throw a Matt Harmon, a Yahoo, calls the sacrificial X, just the guy who is going to be the X receiver, run deep just because you need someone there to kind of have the vertical element and make the defense think someone's running deep. I think Mac Hollins probably is just a little more well-rounded with especially like what he's doing in the run game and everything too, and just that type of player that he is. So I think it's probably going to be tough for Baker. Like I'd still believe there is something there, but the fact that it hasn't started to show itself a little more as an actual offensive skill is probably a little concerning.
Yeah. All right, ready to talk defense?
Let's do it.
Cool. So the thing that you missed, because you're a healthy person, is the edge setting to me, folks at home, that was missing. And this was more of a second half issue. It was a carryover from the joint practice, which the Patriots blew basically every perimeter run that they could. Here you go. And the guy who was, at the center of some of these blown edges was Truman Jones, who's, third-year guy who is fighting to make a roster spot. They've really taken a liking to, Harvard kid. Seems like a great dude. But those things, less so in this scheme, more so in the last one, which I'm still trying to not detox from, but untrain my brain from everything that was the Bill Belichick defense, is still important, because those perimeter runs where you lose the edge, or if you're not spilling, you don't spill, turn into explosives. And so that to me is something I think as a group they're going to work on. They'll get a really good test this week in Minnesota with how much they are still running the traditional outside zone stuff. But that to me stuck out as something that, in addition to the pressure numbers, which were not good, I think those probably got more attention than the edge setting in the run game, which I think could be a little sturdier.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get it's something that is tough, especially for some of these young guys who are going to be thinking, especially in the preseason, you rush the passer, yeah. And when the run comes, they're not quite ready for it. Which I think he showed well during the passing plays, though. I was I was pretty impressed with what he was doing. And again, the run defense wasn't quite there overall. I think the interesting thing is, even though pressure numbers weren't there for this defense, I liked what they were doing up front. And I think my big takeaway was really the Milton Williams impact of what this could potentially do along this defensive front, where they were doing a lot of different things in 4 down fronts, just because you could line Williams up in different spots and he'll be able to kind of just take on whatever he needs to. He was, inside the tackle, he was, straight up on guards. They were able to show a lot of different looks there. And I think that was really nice to see. Let's see, he was 4-eye when he was able to get to Hartman, but I don't think he had a pressure that was actually credited to him. And that was the play before, he's in the backfield quick for the tackle for loss on the screen, just because, he was there and able to chase down. So I think you're just going to have that quick first step is really going to open up a lot of things, going to make offensive lines really rethink about who they are going to have to block and double team there. And I think that he was able to have, Tonga got open, I think, for on a one-on-one because of a double team to Williams and how quickly he was there. So I do think, even though the overall, defensive pressure numbers weren't there, if you're kind of looking at some of what was actually charted, I think the impact of what they were able to do was my big takeaway of what this defensive front was able to do.
So I pat my chest when you mentioned Kairos Tonga, because folks in this podcast know that I have talked him up more than certain members of my family. He's had an unbelievable training camp, but I don't know what to do with, except for just keep screaming it from the mountaintops that the Patriots' third defensive tackle spot, which looks shaky to me with this journeyman, is now, Polynesian Superman. So there we go. Prize Picks is back, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, and the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to people who have never even played fantasy sports. Because here's how simple it is. I'm watching the Sox on Tuesday at home, and I think Cedar Rafaela, who's on fire, or Jaron Duran, who's not, or Raymond Anthony, who's really coming into form, will have a certain number of hits or runs, or maybe a home run, or Walker Buehler's going to give up a lot of hits, but maybe bounce back. Boom. Those thoughts, those takes turn into cash, but only at PrizePicks. And here's how it works. All you have to do is build a lineup of 2 to 6 players. Every player comes with a stat. It could be hits, it could be runs, it could be walks. And we get into the football season, yards, touchdowns, you name it. They've got more stats and players than you can think of. You look at that player, you see their stat. You pick more or you pick less. And you do this for 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 6 players. Lock in your lineup, and that's it. You can win cash. Withdraw it via Venmo, Apple Pay, however you want, quick and easy deposits. Again, you can mix players from sports, different games, teams, whatever it is. The best place to win cash while watching sports. So don't wait anymore. I have it still playing all summer and will straight through the end of the year. Download the app today. Use code CLNS. This is the best part. To get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Milton Williams, though, I'm so glad you brought him up because, there are things that I have to leave off of my film review, and that's because I have to fit my stuff in a newspaper, and I give my editor enough headaches when it comes to writing long. And Milton Williams is important for 2 reasons in the context that you just brought him up, because you hit the nail on the head. Number one is you can exploit matchups now because you have an above-average, excellent pass rusher who you can just put opposite the worst offensive lineman of the other team and say, go nuts, okay? And this is something the Patriots used to do with the back end of Vince Wilfork's prime in a way that's a little bit different. And even sometimes Vince, if their best run blocker was a left tackle, he used to do this with the Ravens. Maybe it was the right tackle. Forgive me. It's been about 10, 12 years. But the point was, he'll either negate your strength or absolutely put a load of weight, 330 pounds, on your weakness. And you've got to figure that out. There are not many players that have had that kind of power before Milton Williams, certainly not in the last 5 years. The other thing about it is there's a gravity with that, right? Once we do this and we can win one-on-one matchups, provided you allow them, great, it's pressure for us. Boom, it's just an easy transaction. If you, as an offense then, though, account for Milton Williams being across from your worst pass protector with a back chipping or a slide or a double team or whatever, that opens up stuff for us on the other side. And so that gravity for him is also something that's been missing, not just a player good enough to do consistent damage, but one to draw attention away from other players. And that they've been leveraging all of camp, as you mentioned, as a 4-eye, 0, a 1, a 3 technique, basically anywhere between the 2 tackles, which I freaking love, because this should not be a simple, we're playing an over front, and you're going to be 3, and you'll be left defensive end and the right defensive end. Mix it up, create stress, create havoc, even within a system that's simplified compared to the old one under Belichick.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be stuff where it's going to open up a more easier one-on-one for Tonga or a Keon White on the other side, which also happened in this game. And then when you are kind of trying to find blitzing lanes for Spillane or Christian Ellis, I think those are things that work because of how you are able to align Williams and what those the offensive line has to account for him and who is blocking him. So I think it's a lot of fun. And I was, after seeing it in practice, I was more excited for what that defensive front could look like at full strength, and how they're going to be able to kind of weaponize that. It is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's one thing for all of us in the offseason, self-included, to talk about Vrabel's a good coach and you maximize the talent. Terrell Williams might be the best defensive line coach in football, and now he's a coordinator. Okay, cool. What are they doing to maximize their talent or to leverage your best players? This is, example A of that. Milton Williams playing all across the defensive front. Sometimes it'll be game plan. Sometimes it'll just be, the structure of the rush that they want to run, or the sim pressure, or the actual blitz, which there was a lot of, blitzing as I saw it, sometimes from the slot, sometimes one of those inside linebackers, and they played traditional, zone blitz behind it, 3 deep, 3 underneath. And it's just, it's great to see, because he's sometimes been a non-factor, and that happened in the joint practice. Milton Williams was. It'll happen. Okay. That's football, but he bounced back, had a really good preseason debut, and I think it was part of the positioning. What else in the front did you like or did you notice?
Yeah, I think I kind of like those are my big takeaways, because I think, having a guy like that when you don't have to blitz too, and it's eventually going to be able to create pressure, because I think when you look at what they were doing last year, I think for FTN numbers were 28th in pressure rate with the 7th highest blitz rate. And when pressure rate's low and blitz rate's that high, I feel like you don't really want that. And I think that's eventually going to make the corner's job easier too, and the secondary. So I'm really excited to see how that continues to develop, because I think how good this defense could potentially be, it just kind of comes from that front.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, again, we talk about this attacking scheme and it's single gap, and it's different from what you've been accustomed. We all on train watching it. What some of the common counters to that are space plays, on the perimeter, bubble screens, whatever you want, get the ball up quickly to avoid the pressure and then put everyone else on the move in a different direction. But there's also misdirection. And I think so far in the tiny, tiny, tiny limited sample, very diluted sample that we've seen in practice in this preseason opener, they've been pretty all over screens. They've been over space plays. And I really love for them that they got to go against this Cliff Kingsbury offense, because that offense is nothing if not, we're going to put you in space and you're going to have to run around, and you're going to have to do sometimes when we're going no huddle, which they didn't have much of an issue with, at least, from an operational standpoint, not blowing coverages. Like there were issues and they gave stuff up, specifically in the red zone in the second half, which you don't love. And the tackling was not as good, but it's early, it's preseason. And, that is something I think has been overlooked, is the reaction to misdirection and screens and being able to handle this. Again, granted, against the Commanders' second, third, and fourth stringers. In the back end, this is a, deep cut fifth safety battle, which is now overshadowed by Kyle Duggar repping with all of the backups. Marcus Epps, who's played around, looked good. I thought Del Pettis from the back end flew in, and these guys might not have anything to do with how the season goes. And Peppers and Hawkins and Duggar, Craig Woodson stay healthy, but they're players who are in there fighting for a roster spot. And I feel better about the position than I did before this game.
Yeah, and that was Mapu having a nice game. He looked like he was kind of supposed to be this, the Duggar type of, he can kind of do a little bit of everything. And I think it's very hard. I'm coming into this fact that it's very hard for these guys who are supposed to be the versatile, can play anywhere, queen on the chessboard type piece, to get thrown immediately into that role. And I think we kind of saw that over the first, the couple years of his career. But I think if you have a little more of a specific role for him, I do think that's those speed and the instincts do play. So I am interested to see what he can do, because I think he was kind of, the standout in the back end for me.
Yeah, and he's missed he missed practice today, but was the peak player of the better in theory than in practice, as you said, right? Like on the field. And I think the scheme is a better fit, because it's just, hey, you're going to play linebacker, and you might want to add on 5 pounds, but that's good enough. That's all you need. And you could go to the extreme example of Isaiah Simmons in Arizona, just like they didn't know what to do with him, but they loved him in Clemson. And I don't have him on my roster right now, but I am happy to see that, as you mentioned, because he's also a very smart player. Like he had this as a rookie. It just, the scheme fit wasn't there, and that's not his problem. That was Bill Belichick's fault. It picked him in the 3rd round. Those guys should make an impact. They should be rookies. They should have a role, and it just never settled in. Second level, Christian Ellis, who started, and they love as a blitzer. They love his range, his character, makeup. It's great. Tackling is a little shoddy, and I don't think it was an accident that today Dr. Gibby, of course, as everyone knows, Jack Gibbons, just backup former Titans linebacker, took some of his stuff today. He took some starting snaps. And ideally, because I think Ellis has a higher ceiling, he keeps that job. You run with Robert Spillane, you're cooking with gas. Cool. But Gibbons, not just because of the system experience, but because he's on everything. And when he gets there, unlike Ellis, a little bit of a sure tackler, is just something that I'm not worried about, but keeping my eye on.
Yeah, and I think Gibbons is interesting because didn't play a lot of snaps last year, but fairly good in coverage too. So I think it's one of those things, like, even if you are rotating those guys, probably not the worst idea, kind of based on the situation. But you do just kind of overall want some better tackling from linebackers. And that's where I think when you just kind of look league wide, when you do have a guy you can kind of either run at or kind of target in coverage where he might be a danger to be a missed tackle. That's where some of the better offenses in the league are going to target. So as much as I am a fan of Christian Ellis, I again agree. I do like his blitzing, probably one of the better blitzing linebackers in the league. But if you are a little bit of a weak link in a place where they can either run at you like that and they're just kind of worried about you, not necessarily worried about being brought down first contact, that's something that a lot of teams are going to be targeting on the field.
Real quick, because he's going to be a captain, he's going to be the signal caller, the face, the voice of the defense. Robert Spillane, what do you make of him? Because people who have a PFF subscription will see that he got killed for this game. I didn't particularly agree, and it's not because I have any trouble criticizing members of the Patriots, as we've just done, and talked about tackling and things like that. It's just to say that, this is a player I think has been miscast a little bit, whereas I don't want to say the box score doesn't match his stats because he's had good counting stats, right? But there's just something there about his game I don't think even the grades kind of capture unless you're really looking at this player, and you would have seen him more with the Raiders than I did the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think he's a good player. I think he's one of the more underrated linebackers in the league. He's had a couple years with good coverage metrics. I think the one thing that PFF doesn't really account for in their grades, especially when you look at coverage, is I believe like plays where they're not targeted. So I do think, especially for linebackers, that's tough because usually when you are targeted as the linebacker, usually something was pretty open. Like I remember, I think someone was talking about Fred Warner had this high completion percentage against, and it's like because you're only throwing at Fred Warner if it's like wide open, and it was like 10 targets. So if they caught 8 of them, that's fine, but he's spending the entire season deterring targets. So
famously bad in coverage, Fred Warner, future Hall of Famer. Okay.
So it's kind of one of those things where this one of those things where the stats are cool, but make sure like the context of what actually is going into them when you're looking at it. So I think he's a fun guy. He has the range. I think he does play downhill well. I think he'll be more than fine in coverage. So even if it was technically not the greatest preseason thing, I think he's going to be able to play in the middle of that defense fairly well.
The only other 2 guys that I had in my notes, one of whom has gotten a lot of love, and deservedly so, in training camp, but left early with an injury yesterday and didn't practice today, is DJ James, who had a pick. Small, sticky enough, second-year corner. You like to see him as maybe corner 5 or corner 6. Elijah Ponder was this big edge that I bring up not because of what he did on defense, and he's also not practiced, but as far as I understand, will not be out forever. Like he'll be back sooner rather than later. He started in 3 special teams units, and to me, that's always the indicator of guys that the staff likes more than you do, and are willing to give a little bit more run on offense and defense, and maybe not to the degree that Bill Belichick did. Like he's got to produce pressure and he's got to fit in the defense. But those are 2 guys that I had my eye on. If there's anything else or anybody else that we missed, fire away.
No, I think that was pretty much where I came down on defense. I mean, I would love to see what this defense starts to look like when you have the starting corners actually out there, because I think that'll be fun. But in terms of first preseason game, that's all I had.
Cool. All right, you have 5, 6, maybe 7. We'll see where this goes. Minutes to fill me in and everybody else on what the hell happened in week 1 of the preseason, because I've been as myopic with this team in the last few weeks as I've ever been. So tell me what else is going on in the NFL.
I mean, Shedeur Sanders is the greatest football player that's ever played. I mean, again, it was just kind of one of those things. Like he was fine, and I think like it's kind of my biggest takeaway from a lot of preseason things is just kind of don't get too carried away with anything. Like he was okay. He was shaky early. Kind of came in and it made like some good throws, but again, like we knew he could do that. But I don't know how much of that really translates or moves the needle on what he was. If you kind of go back and look at it, he was okay, which is fine. And again, like even this out like 6 yards per attempt is this was the greatest 6 yards per attempt the game we've ever talked about. So it's somewhere in between of a lot of these things. I am when we look at what Minnesota coming in, like you said, very interested to see what that is going to look like, because we saw JJ McCarthy have his first reps, and that was again okay. I think there was some throws that he made. Some he looked very skittish, and you mentioned the Brian Flores defense earlier, and there was one negative play that that JJ McCarthy had, and he was asked about it later, and he said, "I am so used to in practice having to get that ball out as fast as possible, so I tried, and if I had held on to that ball a little longer, saw this guy get into that second window, I probably could have made that throw." So this is a place where practicing against Brian Flores is screwing a guy up in an actual game, which is funny. So some other things that take away, Travis Hunter playing both sides of the ball, super
Love
fun.
Yeah.
I think there's still a little bit. He's gonna. It looks like he about 50-50 in the slot and outside. I think they're going to be running some screens for him, which is going to be super fun. That's something that I want to try to continue to keep an eye on. It's hard not to get too carried away in some of these. In some of these preseason games. If you have not seen the Bo Nix safety, go watch that, because it's just like that's what the first week of the preseason is for. Just some weird plays that you're just like, what are you doing? It's the Drake May fumble like times 10. It's fantastic.
Okay.
Just kind of like scrambling around and should not be trying to run away from the defender like he was. Finds himself in the end zone, gets an intentional grounding. Like that.
I'll say this because I watched maybe 2-3 Broncos games last year. Not enough to make sweeping declaration, but it's time for a sweeping declaration because Bo Nix was ahead of Drake May and Mike Sando's quarterbacks tiers today, where he polls coaches and GMs and this and that, and the gap was only 20-22. But I'm sorry, a guy who leads the league in throwing behind the line of scrimmage and is just a check down Charlie who gets to ride on one of the better rosters in the NFL into the playoffs, okay? Just going and stopping at every yellow light and then going when it says green because his defense has cleared the way. I'm sorry, it's not better than Drake May, who is carrying instead, in an inverse of this example, the entire team through red lights, okay? And even at the beck and call of coaches who don't know how to drive. So for me, I just can't stand by, and I had to mention that.
Yeah, I'm not pandering because I'm on the Patriots podcast, but that's 100% correct. If I was starting a team today, I would still take Drake May over Bo Nix like 10 times out of 10. And I'm not particularly sure it's close. Bo Nix definitely better than I thought he was going to be coming out. There are some good things that they are able to do, but again, you look at an offense like that, so well coordinated, and like the deep shots he's taken those are where the deep shots are supposed to be coming from. And they're open, and they, know the right times to take those shots. Everything's so well protected. I think Drake May would kill for like 2 of the pockets that Bo Nix gets on a regular game. So I think, that is another one of those things where you would really need the context of what these guys are asked to do. Because again, Drake May is definitely a better quarterback with just kind of everything he has been asked to do, all things equal. And even, all things not equal, I was just more impressed with Drake May's season last year than I was Bo Nix, even though the numbers would look a lot more favorable for Nix.
Yeah. One other sweeping declaration on something I have not yet watched, meaning that Jaguars preseason game. But I know Liam Cohen is a clever offensive coordinator. And if you are laying breadcrumbs of a little bubble screen in the preseason, and you're a defensive coordinator who goes, okay, Travis Hunter doesn't know the whole playbook. This is probably the simple stuff they're going to do. I'll bet you your beverage of choice, weeks 1-4, they will run, as I've heard it, like kind of pump seam, bubble pump seam. So you're faking the bubble, and everyone comes crashing down, and then there go the guys who are supposed to set the blocks in front of the bubble screen, going straight down the seam, and they're typically going to be open. If the Jaguars do not run this, they owe me a beverage. But instead, I will give one to you and hope that Liam Cohen will come back around, because I think you just have to do that if you're going to set up all the attention on Travis Hunter, who deserves all of the attention, by the way, to fake the bubble and then go downfield. It's the easiest cash grab you could have early in the season.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the other thing I want to push back on with the Travis Hunter, and I think it was Travis Kelce who said the teams are just going to line up their speed receiver and make him run wind sprints if he's playing corner. you know what? If you want to take away a player and a full like half of the field because you're trying to get the cornerback to run, the Jaguars are going to take that, every time too.
Yeah, sure.
You're gonna have us defend like 10 on 10. That's fine. So I think I'm not sure enough people are really taking into consideration like this Travis Hunter thing is going to be real, and they're really going to try it. He's going to play both ways, and it's going to be super exciting to see.
I'll just never forget, and I don't shout them out often, but this tweet was great, of the James Gladstone press conference, and he's just slowing down like a man who knows or believes that every word he's about to say is more profound than the next, and how Travis Hunter is about belief and Duval and everything in community about football. And the caption from Barstool was like, tries ayahuasca once. And there's a clip of the press conference. I'm like, it's perfect. Also, I can't believe, Travis Kyles, whomever said this, that no one in college had the idea of tiring out the guy who's playing both sides of the ball. What a revolutionary thought. It just occurred to me here in the 30 seconds after you informed us, which I'm rooting for the kid. He's a marvel. Like, I want to see this. I think it's going to happen. And that Jaguars game, I can tell you, I will find time to watch. Not the preseason, but week 1, I'm absolutely there.
Yep. There we go.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. This has been great. Thank you for hanging out. The first edition of What You Missed. I'm sure you'll be back on at some point in the regular season. We'd love to have you. I always learn chatting with you. Where can people find you? I know you're doing a lot of good work on Blue Sky, but anything else you got going or coming up?
Yeah, the Blue Sky mostly. Twitter occasionally. Where I am doing other work is, as you know, as much as I do right now. So we'll try to figure that out.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you. And this was great as always.
All right. Thanks.